You know, in the old days, they used to put your eyes out with a red-hot poker. Any of those bikini bombshells you're always watching worth a red-hot poker?
Why do we people watch? What compels us to look or even listen in on the lives of others? Is it therapeutic or cathartic? Is it because our lives are so boring and mundane that we must search longingly into the lives of others to find joy or excitement? I'm not entirely sure, but in my journey to try and get to the bottom of this idea, I noticed something that made me think specifically about photography and the capturing of subjects, that being the similarities and differences between the photographer and the voyeur. Now, when I say voyeur, I mean it removed from its usual sexual connotation, if such a thing even exists. I'll be honest, I had a hard time finding a word for a non-sexual voyeur that felt right. People watcher, rubbernecker, looky-loo, none of these seem to slide as easy off the tongue as voyeur. But at any rate, maybe my inability to willingly accept one of these other titles for L.B. Jeffries, the protagonist of Rear Window, is because it's obvious throughout the film that he derives a certain kind of pleasure from the whole activity. A version of, depending on who you ask, healthy or unhealthy escapism, born of his confinement. The events that take place outside of his rear window amount to what feels like a slice of life stage play, or even several plays going on at once. And his gaze drifts not just from window to window, but pierces through the membrane itself, almost uncomfortably entering the lives of his neighbors. It feels like a little kid watching TV from just a few inches away, but with all the safety and perhaps creepiness of watching from afar. In Jeffries' immobile, compromised state, all he could do was look out the window, attempting to live vicariously through his neighbors.
I can smell trouble right here in this apartment. First you smash your leg, then you get to looking out the window, see things you shouldn't see. Trouble. I can see you in court now, surrounded by a bunch of lawyers in double-breasted suits. You're pleading. You say, Judge, it was only a little bit of innocent fun. I love my neighbors like a father. And the judge says, well, congratulations. You've just given birth to 3 years in Dannemora.
I want to note something about the windows here, specifically how it ties into Jeffries' job as a photographer. The window serves as a frame, and just like a photograph, we are only privy to what's inside the frame. It serves as a snapshot, a sneak peek into the lives of its subjects, but in a quite literal sense, fails to show us the whole picture. In Jeffries' mind, these neighbors aren't even really fully fleshed out people. They're the incomplete caricatures he's assigned to them for the sake of convenience. The flamboyant Miss Torso, the hopeless romantic Miss Lonelyhearts, a talented pianist and his guests, a traveling jewelry salesman and his bedridden wife. And with only the window serving as an entry point to understanding this colorful cast of characters, it doesn't take much for a person in Jeffries' position to begin crafting stories and narratives for them, especially when he speculates that one of his neighbors has committed murder. But let's pull back to photography for a second. Jeffries is confined to his apartment in Greenwich Village, more specifically his window, because of a leg injury he sustained while capturing a brutal crash at a racetrack. Something Jeffries confides in Lisa, the love interest he's presumed to marry, is the dangerous nature of his occupation, painting the picture of photographers like him who suffer brutal conditions and circumstances, all in service of getting the perfect shot.
Did you ever eat fish heads and rice?
Of course not.
Well, if you might have to if you went with me. Did you ever try to keep warm on a C-54 at 15,000 feet, 20 degrees below zero?
Oh, I do it all the time. Whenever I have a few minutes after lunch.
Did you ever get shot at? Did you ever get run over? Did you ever get sandbagged at night because somebody got unfavorable publicity from your camera? Did you ever have those high heels? They'll be great in the jungle, and the nylons and those 6-ounce lingerie.
3.
All right, it's 3. Well, they'll make a big hit in Finland just before you freeze to death.
Well, if there's one thing I know, it's how to wear the proper clothes.
Yeah. Well, try and find a raincoat in Brazil, even when it isn't raining. Lisa, in this job, you carry one suitcase. Your home is the available transportation. You don't sleep very much, you bathe less. And sometimes the food that you eat is made from things that you couldn't even look at when they're alive.
Jeff, you don't have to be...
I think there's something incredibly intriguing about the role of the photographer and their quest in capturing truth as well as beauty. The photographer is a career based in action, going out, seeing the world for what it is, its messiness, its raw realness, its imperfections, and figuring out the proper way to frame it. make the dark, harsh realities of the world palatable and presentable for the masses, a process which might involve not doing all that much in the way of distorting subject matter. I think Jeffrey's love for imperfection in this way is also why he starts off disillusioned by the idea of marrying Lisa. A bubbling socialite whose persona exudes perfection as well as sophistication seems like a prospect somewhat unfulfilling, which is why he allows his gaze to wander, out from the top of his vantage point, just over the horizon, into the home of another.
You know, much as I hate to give Thomas J. Doyle too much credit, he might have gotten a hold of something when he said that was pretty private stuff going on out there. I wonder if it's ethical to watch a man with binoculars and a long focus lens. Do you suppose it's ethical even if you prove that he didn't commit a crime?
I'm not much on Rear Window ethics.
Of course, they can do the same thing to me, watch me like a bug under a glass if they want to.
Jeff, you know, if someone came in here, they wouldn't believe with it, see?
What?
You and me with long faces, plunged into despair because we find out a man didn't kill his wife. We're two of the most frightening ghouls I've ever known.
Something the film also brings into question is the ethics of people watching. Earlier, I posited that referring to Jeffries as a voyeur seemed like the proper course of action. When it comes to just how private and intimate a lot of these moments that he finds himself observing really are, the moniker only seems fitting. But what about murder? What if you see something or suspect that you see something? Is it ethical to follow these suspicions wherever they may lead for the sake of justice, as a far watchful eye becomes an invasive physical presence? Now, Rear Window somewhat answers this question, when Jeffrey's suspicions are proven right, that his neighbor did in fact murder his wife. But this conclusion stems from Jeffrey's own gradual breaking of barriers in his quest to solve the narrative, bring truth to the small picture he sees from outside his window. This desire, while shady concerning ethics, speaks to something innately human, our long-standing traditions in crafting stories. We can spin tales and craft chronicles out of very little. We do this on a daily basis as we peer into the lives of others, a passerby on the street, a fellow rider on the train, even a person on the internet. We only experience these brief, subtle interactions with strangers. It's impossible to get the whole picture, a semblance of their full stories, so for better or for worse, we fill in the gaps, painting an entire canvas based on a blurry, low-resolution reference that we call a social interaction. Where am I going with this? Well, I'm writing and recording this during the quarantine of the COVID-19 pandemic. I haven't seen pretty much anyone outside of my own family for weeks, and here in the US, we're still at the point where each day gets exponentially worse. It becomes exponentially more dangerous to leave the safety of your home, not just for your sake, but for the sake of everyone else, as we do our best to flatten the curve. And as we bunker inside, we turn to social media for our influx of interactions. I know I've definitely seen my Twitter screen time increase drastically in the past weeks, as I attempt to consume every news article and dumb Twitter joke that I can. It wasn't until recently that I realized just how much I rely on in-person acknowledgement. Whether it be from a friend or a total stranger, I find myself looking outward at other people's lives to make some semblance of sense out of my own. It's therapeutic and cathartic. So when someone, perhaps a social distancing walker or jogger, passes by my home on their government-mandated single walk a day, I must confess that I do look out my window, if only for a moment. Not because I think their life is so much more interesting than mine, not for any reason. Just looking out the window, waiting. Perhaps for the day they finally choose to look back. Mind Theater is produced and written by me, Heo Akingbade, in collaboration with Muckraker Media. For updates on the show and upcoming episodes, follow Mind Theater Pod on Twitter. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.
Oh, dear. We become a race of peeping Toms. What people ought to do is get outside their own house and look in for a change. Yes, sir. How's that for a bit of homespun philosophy?